Welcome, and thank you for watching our recording of Emory University Goizueta Business School Alumni Panel Discussion. I'm Renee Bourbeau, Director of Career Services for the Master of Science in Business Analytics program. The purpose of our gathering today is to acknowledge the unprecedented times we are all navigating today and try to offer inspiration and encouragement to students. During a time like this, we are all reminded how important connections are. And while we are apart, we stand together. I will now introduce our distinguished speakers and ask them to give a brief background and also tell us a fun fact about their favorite streaming service, whether it be movies, books, or music, and why. First, we have Julie Barefoot. Julie is the Associate Dean of Engagement and Partnerships at Emory University, Goizueta Business School. Hi, Julie.
Hello, thanks for this opportunity. As Renee said, I'm the Associate Dean of Engagement and Partnerships. I've worked at Goizueta for over 30 years. The majority of my time, I actually interviewed students, candidates, not unlike Aditya and Steve here on the panel, and for our MBA program. So I've literally interviewed thousands of MBA candidates. So I'm super excited about this opportunity today to speak to you all. And my favorite streaming service is Pandora. I love music, and I listen to music when I'm getting ready in the morning, as well as when I'm walking or cooking.
Thank you, Julie. That's great. Next, we have Dr. Ram Chellappa. Ram is the Associate Dean and Academic Director of the Master of Science in Business Analytics program. He's also a professor and Goizueta Term Chair for the Information Systems and Operations Management. Hello, Dr. Chellappa.
Hello, Renee. Thank you again for inviting me to this panel, and thank you all for joining. I think our students will greatly benefit from some of the discussions that we're going to have. So this is a program that we started about 3 years ago, and I guess we have the third cohort running at this time. And it's been a fun experience so far. I think we have some of the most wonderful students that you can think of, very technical, very quantitative, and yet very curious and a lot of fun. And I guess we want to probably think about how to keep everybody's spirits up in the days of Corona, right? So sometimes I talk about this is you got to write a blog on Corona times. So one of my favorite streaming sites is probably something that most people wouldn't have heard of. It's called Tintkota, and it's a site that streams movies in one of the vernacular languages in India. So you get actually movies in a particular language streamed, and they've actually been around for quite some time, and the quality of these streaming services are just simply incredible. And very recently, I tried to change my internet service provider from AT&T to Comcast. Not a good idea.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate the new tip. I will definitely have to check it out. Next, we have Steve Greenfield. Steve is the president of the Emory Alumni Board, and Steve, welcome.
Thanks, Renee. It's great to be here today and share with the students. Looking back, I met Julie when I first joined Goizueta back in 2001 for an evening MBA program, and graduated in 2004, and then spent 9 years on the Goizueta Alumni Board where I met Aditya. So I had a chance to work with him closely, and then, as you said, I then joined the Emory Alumni Board about 6 years ago, and I'm currently president of the Emory Alumni Board. So I'm thrilled to be here today. My favorite streaming service right now, I've got to say that I'm more addicted than ever to my Sonos system. So I've spent far too much money with Sonos, and as a result, have a couple of different integrations in terms of music that can follow me around the house. But most often I find myself using, as all people are using nowadays, not only do I get enough boxes delivered to my front door, on a daily basis, but now I'm using my Amazon streaming service via my Sonos system.
Thank you so much, Steve. Very interesting. Another new tip I learned today. And finally, last but not least, Aditya Rao, who is my co-creator for this event and truly I think, inspiration, for putting it together. Aditya is the president of Goizueta's Alumni Board, and welcome, Aditya.
Thanks, Renee. It's great to be here. You're too kind. Yeah, so I graduated from the full-time MBA program in 2008. I took Ram's classes while I was at school. I met Julie when I came to school. I worked, obviously, as Steve said, on the board for a while with him. And Renee, of course, we've been working together now for a little bit on a bunch of stuff, like random stuff. So I'm really happy to be here. In terms of a streaming service, for music, I would say I started using Amazon Music a lot. But one of the other things I really like doing now is I've been listening to the NPR streaming service, and they have, particularly, I listened to this, How I Built This by Guy Raz. So they talk about all these companies, not only new companies, and talk to the founders of those companies and how their stories, their struggles, how passionate they were, how, it shows the determination that every single entrepreneur had when they started a company and no idea how big it's going to become. And some of those are really big. So, we talk about Spanx, talk about Belkin, they bring up a Peloton, some really great stories there. So I've been listening to that a lot. My wife turned it on to me, so I do listen to it a lot now.
It sounds great. Thank you for that tip as well. Probably my favorite streaming service right now is Disney Plus. And it's to give you some context, I adopted a puppy before the COVID-19 outbreak. And so it's just been kind of fun to watch these dog movies on Disney Plus and watch my puppy react to the dogs on that are streaming on the show. So that was kind of an unexpected thing. And Disney Plus came free with my phone subscription. So it's kind of a win-win there. So thank you all so much for those introductions. Once again, we're so happy that we could all be together today, and we really would like to, inspire the students and also the alumni as well. So we do have some questions from our MSBA candidates in the class of 2020, and specifically, they would like to know, what advice do you have for the current students? And Steve, perhaps we can start with you on this one.
Yeah, so it's interesting times, right? I mean, I think in the business world, we're all getting much more acquainted with working from home and virtual meetings such as we're doing right now. And I think the students now have been thrust into that world to tie up the remnants of their class. And I think the biggest challenge, interacting with students, as I have the opportunity to, is the fact that there won't be some of these physical traditions in the spring that we would typically have. And I think that's going to be challenging for students, right? So I think that it's going to be growingly important for them to, stay close and connected with their classmates, stay close and connected with faculty, and faculty will help as much as possible with making sure that if internships, for example, are canceled, that we can fill in the gap. And if jobs, hopefully, will continue on. But if job offers get rescinded or paused for some reason, that I think that now is a time to really lean on classmates, faculty and staff, as well as the alumni, to make sure that we get through these times, because I empathize with the students right now. It's a very challenging time.
That's really great advice. And as a follow-up question, what would you think would be an appropriate way for a current student to reach out to an alumni? Do you think an email or going through LinkedIn or perhaps their career services office?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. One is, it's not like the alumni are putting in long hours at the office, right? So I think all of us are finding time, and if students can appreciate this, with partitioning time between work and our regular lives, now that we're working from our dining room tables and home offices and such. But I think what you'll find is probably the alumni, one, have more time, and two, are looking for ways to connect because they're not able to go out to movie theaters and do grocery shopping and go out to the mall, et cetera, with their families. So I think that I would lean on, either LinkedIn as your primary source. There's also Emory Connects, where we've got thousands of alumni connected that have already kind of expressed interest in connecting with students. And I think the best networking method, as Julie probably will talk to, is probably LinkedIn, but there is a certain etiquette. So, I mean, I'm happy to tag team with Julie about the best etiquette for using LinkedIn, but I think it's some combination of being very precise with who you're targeting and why. So generic messages just won't work well. And then being very crisp with the ask. So I am not, for example, a fan of asking for coffee, although now it has to be virtual coffee, or talking about, hey, can I pick your brain on something? I think it's much more important for students to be very, very precise with what they're asking for and sort of what the value prop is back to the alumni, right? So think very crisply around why you're reaching out to this person, what you would like to get as a result of that interaction. And then I think LinkedIn can be very, very effective to reach out to alumni. And I think in general, the students will find the alumni are very sympathetic. The alumni I'm talking to are very keenly interested in what's going on campus and how this is affecting students. So I think they'll find in general a much more receptive audience with alumni to interact, to get back and follow up and try to help in whatever way they can.
That's great advice. So Julie, we have to go to you next. You were named, and it's Steve's response there. Do you have anything to add to come alongside that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Steve did a great job of sort of framing the way the students should look at their outreach to alumni, or really any networking opportunity. But specifically, when you reach out on LinkedIn, which I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn, I think it's a great way to broaden your network. But I just cannot emphasize enough or reiterate enough what Steve said. Generic, pressing that button, which I know is super easy, and saying, I want to connect with you, is not helpful to you, right? So what you want to do is you want to personalize it. Don't make it too long, but make a little note. And then basically, like Steve said, what is it that you want them to do? Then when they connect with you, which I find and I've always heard this, that our alums are wonderful about responding positively to a connection. So you as a student, the next step is that you want to reach out to them, I believe, via email, I think is usually the best, but whichever platform you want to, but when you do that, make sure that the ask that you have for the alum, make it easy for them. So for example, if they work at Emerson Electric, okay, a big industrial company, they work there. And let's say that what you want them to do is you want them to forward your resume to a particular person because you see a job, to a department because you see a job opportunity on that company's website. This student, you should craft the email very thoughtfully and personalize it, attach your resume, and then forward it to that alum. So literally all that alum has to do is maybe tweak it a little bit to personalize it to a colleague if they know it, to the department, and then send it on your behalf. Under no circumstances should you ask an alum to craft that email for you, or really to go much further than that. And my recommendation also is that you make one ask per email. So it's not a layered thing where you're asking this alum in a particular email, oh, I'd like you to send an email to this company. And then you want to make it as easy as possible. After you do that, obviously, if they respond positive, they will thank them. Be responsive and thank them. And then if that opportunity plays out in a positive way, one way or the other, you get an interview, or if you don't get an interview, if it turns out that that opportunity has changed, close the loop with that alum. Again, thank them again, for what they did for you, and then close the loop. And definitely, and if it's positive, if something really great happens, make sure you let that alum know, and also let Renee know, let the office and the school know. So those are just some of the things I would say about sort of best practice in terms of using LinkedIn.
Great advice, Julie. So, keep it keep it simple, make it easy for the alum to help you, and then always circle back and use those best practices for etiquette. Great advice. Aditya, I see you shaking your head there. Do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one little, additional point. I know I completely agree with what Julie and, Steve said. It's very important you get these generic messages. And again, alums, especially Goizueta Emory alums, will respond. But if I get 5 requests and I get 4 of them that have a personalized message, I'm more than likely going to respond to those folks first. And thinking of it that way also helps, because you're the only one who didn't stand out, and tell me what exactly you wanted. And the other thing, just to add on to what Julie said, is close the loop and then make sure that what you're doing right now is building relationships. It's not a short-term transaction. So once you build that relationship, keep the relationship going. If that didn't work out in the job offer or didn't work out the way you wanted it to, still stay connected if you can in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't mean email them every week, but email them if it's still a company you want to work for, or some way down the road. You don't want to burn that bridge. So make sure you're connected in the right way. You leave it off in the right way. You say, hey, I'm going to look at this other opportunity. I'll come, I'll reach back out to you in 6 months, just see how you're doing, see if anything's changed, and then do it. Follow back up in 6 months, put a reminder in your calendar to make sure that happens, because again, you're building a long-term relationship with an alum and you want them to want to help you in the end. So it's all about building those relationships. Thanks.
Great advice, Aditya. Yeah, it's a good reminder for us. On the other end of that LinkedIn message or email is a person who, wants to feel appreciated, and mentorship is truly rewarding. So that's a great reminder for our students to, to share in their successes as well with the mentor who's helped them. Ram, would you like to add anything in this question here? Advice for current students?
Sure. I think, first of all, I think all 3 of you made such amazing points. I think I need to practice more of what Julie just said. I think, this is so true. And our alums are some of the most wonderful people. I've taught at Goizueta for 15 years, and they are simply fantastic. And I'm not just saying this just because we have 2 people here from Goizueta, but they are simply the best that I've come across. And one thing I always tell students is, and I'm an economist mostly by way of research, and I look at this from that perspective as well. And one of my recommendations always to them is develop empathy. And empathy to me is simply the idea of understanding where somebody else comes from, right? It's not necessarily agreeing with them. It's not necessarily disagreeing or even, fully kind of, incorporating what they're saying, but it's really about understanding where they come from. That will help you think, why did the person not respond to my email? Maybe they had something else going on. Maybe, their company is in trouble. Maybe they had a personal problem, right? So having some understanding of when there is another person, that person thinks about the same situation, perhaps in a slightly different way, is an important thing to incorporate in your thinking. The more you understand that, the better off you are in your ability to communicate with others. The second component I always talk to students about is, the notion of what I call a search cost. So the idea of a search cost in economics is that in order to find something that fits you, you have to search, right? The question is, the issue is either you can do the search or the employer can do the search and find you. Always incorporate that cost on behalf of the employer, on behalf of the other person, where you're going to do all the work so that they have to minimize the amount of effort they need to spend in understanding why you are the fit. Most employers are not looking for the most brilliant, the next person who would win the Nobel Prize, but they're really looking for somebody that would fit their organization. And they are looking for not an automaton, they're looking for a future colleague who's going to be sitting in a cube across from them. So be aware of that.
Great advice. Fitting into the culture is a huge component of why someone may be considered for employment. Thank you. That's great. So our next question really focuses around market conditions. And for most of our current students, this is maybe the first time they've experienced, something like this. Of course, this is an unprecedented situation in our market, but this is not the first time that there have been challenging conditions for a graduating class. So I'd like to ask Aditya, can you talk a little bit about the market conditions when you graduated? I believe it was in 2008 with your MBA, and how did you overcome that situation?
Sure. Yeah. So funny enough, it was, I remember 2007, things were gravy. Everything was going so well. The market was booming. During our internships, we all had fantastic internships between our first and second year. I think around June, July, we started hearing little rumblings about something that's going on, but there really wasn't much. And then around the same time frame, around March, is when the Bear Stearns went belly up, Lehman Brothers, all that stuff really proverbially hit the fan. And from one day to the next, almost like it is right now, people got their offers rescinded. Suddenly the market dried up. I was one of the lucky few. I've got to say, I worked. I had an offer with a company that did not rescind any offers that year. But I know a lot of my friends and classmates who, at the last second, they were about to graduate and they had to go and be creative. And I think a lot of them, said it's all about the network, how you leverage your network, how you reach out to folks, people you've stayed connected with. So they, kind of did that, went that route to be creative and get another opportunity. And on the other side, the folks who got offers and had offers and went on to start their full-time jobs, one of the things we had to realize was the market was still not great. It took a while for it to recover. And one of the things I remember my manager telling me, and Julie kind of hinted about this, even when you talked about reaching out to alums, but he said, Aditya, your only job is to make my life easier. So, smile, put your head down, work hard. It may not be the perfect job that you got. Maybe it's a job that you're like, okay, well, I would rather have gotten something else, but that is the one you have. So do your best, bust your butt, make sure you leave a good impression on whichever company you're working. And a year down the road when things may change, and they will change, people appreciate the work that you did for the year you were with the company, and then you may go on to bigger and better things for yourself. But making sure you bust your butt. I know I probably worked the longest hours I ever worked, though the market was dry. I was in consulting, there weren't a lot of projects, but we worked a lot on proposals, just lending a helping hand to whoever needed help in the company. Basically making sure your company does well. That's what your goal is. So, it was really that everyone had to kind of put that positive spin to everything and say, I'm going to focus and do a good job on whatever I do and do it right. So I know it's frustrating when things like this happen, but the way you handle yourself will, repay you later on down the road. So just remember that.
Great advice, Aditya. You can always find opportunities if you look for them. Terrific. Julie, do you have something to add to this question?
I do, although most of it, it's going to be somewhat reiterating and emphasizing the great points that Aditya made. I too graduated during a tough time, a few years before Aditya, but before that recession, the recession of 1983 was pretty bad. Just to give you a point of reference, at the time, I looked this up because I'd forgotten exact numbers, but the mortgage rates at the time were 13% in 1983, compared to 3% now, just to give you a sense of how bad. So it was it was a really tough time to graduate, and it was obviously a very challenging job market. And I had to work really, really hard to get a job. And there were some things I learned, and the first one is something that Ram mentioned that I can't emphasize enough. And number one is it gave me a lot of empathy for students who graduated. For example, Aditya's class, I remember it very well, the stress they were under, and I think it made me even more interested and concerned of doing anything I could to help them, and that has certainly stayed with me. My own daughter graduated around that time period, and it really gave me a lot of well, empathy, but also it made me mindful of what it was like and how scared she was and concerned. But again, it also told me that, you know, just like Aditya said, you know, you've got to put yourself out there and think about things from the employer's perspective. I've always seen, you know, what I shared with certainly my daughter is your job is to make your boss's life easier. And if that's the mindset that you have in anything that you do, you're going to be okay. And also obviously be a good colleague and all that. But that's, you know, you again, it's adding value, like Steve said, to your company and things like that. So it gave me a lot of empathy for what the students are going through. It absolutely crystallized the importance of building and maintaining relationships. And I know that's been a theme here, but that is so, so important. You build these relationships, but they should last your lifetime. And that's how, and you maintain them by staying in touch with people in a positive manner on occasion where it's relevant. It's not sending them an email every, you know, day about your career search. It's being thoughtful. It's sharing articles. If you see an article about a company that you maybe had a reach out with, send that to them. That's really important. And also, every interaction is important. And you don't know when you make a contact, you don't know who that person knows. So you know, think about that. Think about relationships holistically. Don't just think, oh, well, that person works at Coca-Cola, so that's the best relationship. You don't know that. It could, yes, that could be true, but it could be the person that maybe works at a smaller startup, but their partner works at a bigger company that might have an opportunity for you. So think about things holistically and maintain those relationships in a positive way.
Great advice, Julie. And I would like to take this opportunity for everyone watching here. If you're not already connected with us on LinkedIn, go ahead and reach out to us and connect with us. And I think you'll see, I follow everyone here on this discussion today. If you want to see some role models for relationship building, please just, you know, take a look at what Julie's doing or what Aditya or Steve's doing. It's excellent to watch and really great advice, and it will serve our students very well. Steve, this next question is really for you and Aditya as well. But, you know, in addition to being reactionary, the alumni, you know, when they receive a message from a current student, what else can the Emory alumni do to help the class of 20 and even perhaps class of 2021?
Yeah, so I would say the best thing for them to do is just be engaged, right? Raise their hand. Both Goizueta and Emory have large alumni staff and as well a large group of alumni staff, as well as career management centers. And you know, they're always looking for content in terms of getting alumni back, re-engage with students. I think a good example of which is today. You know, webinars like this that can help students out. As you've noticed, there's more and more of these right now across Goizueta to help students with content that's timely and hopefully actionable for them. I think if you're an alumni out there and you want to get more engaged, just reach out and pay more attention. Pay more attention to social media for events like this. Pay more attention to what's going on with the students in terms of news. And there are action funds right now to help those students in need. And I think that reaching out back to your alma mater, be it the Career Management Center or someone that you know, even faculty, they can reconnect you with the school and make sure that you have the correct way to re-engage with the school and ensure that you can make an impact on students. And then, as I said, you can search for Emory Connects. It's just connects.emory.edu, and you can sign up there as an alumni. It's quite easy. Raise your hand and set your profile for how you want to interact with students. And I'm sure that Julie may have other ways that are more Goizueta specific for alumni to sort of raise their hand and signal intent to get back in touch with students. But there are many ways right now. And as you get context from, you know, this session today, the students, there's a lot of ambiguity right now and uncertainty, and it's rather unsettling for students. They're not going to have the physical traditions to the end of their school year. Internships are being rescinded. I haven't heard that much about jobs being rescinded yet, thankfully, but I think we'll see how the severity of the economic impact plays out over the remainder of the year. I think for all of these reasons, now is a time, if you've been sitting on the sidelines and wanting to get engaged, is to raise your hand, reach out to the schools and try to help students because they really need your help.
That's a wonderful call to action. Thank you so much. Aditya, do you have anything to add to this question?
Yeah, sure. I'm not going to repeat what Steve said, but I think the school has good relationships with a lot of the big companies. If you're working for a small company and you're not engaged in some way, definitely reach out. You can help. Just because you're in a smaller company somewhere, don't think that the school is only going to work with bigger companies or anything of that sort. So you can make a huge impact if you have a network and folks who have internships, jobs, any kind of ways for students to get engaged is helpful. So reach out to the school. And again, you might say, well, no one's reached out to me. That's fair, but reach out to whoever you know at the school, anyone you've kept in touch with, reach out. Or if you've not kept in touch with, I'm sure no one's not going to respond to you if you're offering to help. So, students would really appreciate it. The network, the entire Emory community will appreciate that. So definitely do that. Open up your networks as long, to the students. Students will need to reach out to folks through alternative channels. The CMC has resources, but it's also limited resources. At some point, opening up your network, and if you know of someone, again, who can help a student, make the connection, try to help out. So I think those are a couple of things that you can do.
Thank you, Aditya. Ram, I see you nodding your head there. Would you like to add anything?
Yes, and I think one of the points that Aditya mentioned early on and even now is don't be transactional with your relationship with the alumni. I mean, you're not talking to them only because you need a job. You're talking to them because they are your fellow, alumni, right? And so a job may come eventually, or maybe it is not at all about a job. Maybe it is just about learning what is going on in the industry, right? So it's just a relationship. It's not, it ought not to be transactional. And the second component that I wanted to kind of touch upon is particularly for our MSBA 2020 folks, is that if there is any job that is well suited for the stay-at-home, pants optional world that we are in right now, is essentially really about is really analytics. And truly, a lot of the analytics work is going on where you don't necessarily need to be in the office. And this is actually one of the reasons why we don't see so much retrenchment in terms of the analytics positions. So you should be very confident in your approach towards looking for analytics jobs. And the last thing I want to say is for our alumni, our alumni, like I mentioned before, I've taught here for 15 years and many of them are MBA alumni. They may not all be very familiar with our program. And, just a couple of lines about our program is that, we are at the cusp of business, data, and technology, right? So our students are as good as computer scientists, as good as statisticians, but no point in time forgetting that we are business school students. So we develop who we call a business data scientist. And if your organization is, I'm sure all organizations are in this space, one way or the other, do think about our students.
That's excellent. Thank you. Great advice. And Aditya, it seems like you would like to add something to Ram's point.
Yeah, I just thought of something else as we were talking. Something Ram mentioned, kind of made me think of alums. And alums, the thing I realized is that it's not just a one-way relationship either. You get so much. There's so much happening at the school. You get so much by being involved. I think maybe it's not going to happen right now, but I'm going to write a little article about all the things that the Emory network has enabled for me over the last 10, 12 years since I graduated. It is unbelievable the amount of opportunities you get as well. Just being involved with the school, with the staff, with the professor, with the CMC, it pays back 100-fold.
That's excellent. I have also observed that at the Goizueta community. And I would like to take a moment to mention, we do have a mentorship program at Goizueta. So we pair alumni with current candidates. Anyone who is interested in being an MSBA mentor can reach out to me. And anyone interested in being, I believe, an MBA or BBA mentor can reach out to Julie or to the CMC offices as well. Julie, would you have anything else you'd like to add before we move on?
No, I think this has been really good. I just want to, emphasize again, I too love our alums like Ram. I'm not an alum, but I've just been so impressed with their willingness to help. And so again, be mindful of their time and how you can help them. But it is a two-way street. There's nothing more rewarding than mentoring somebody and then seeing them blossom and seeing them realize their dreams. That is so rewarding. So give them that opportunity, but make it easy for them. That's my advice about that.
Great. Ram, this next question is for you. And it's a little bit different context. This would be in the context for companies who are hiring. And we've all seen the articles that, there's big tech and pharma and biotechs are, really ramping up employment, including the at-home companies that are serving that market now. As the companies are transitioning to digital and remote, what advice would you have, or how can the skill set of the class of 2020 be useful to those companies?
It's a very good and important question, and that reminds me of a meme. We've seen a lot of these memes these days. One of these memes that came about, which was like, who was the most important person in the strategic vision of your organization with regards to digital transformation? And the choices were CEO, CIO, CFO, and Corona. And as you can imagine, it's Corona that has made most of the organizations really think about how they do their work, because everybody is now transformed into digital functioning, right? And what is interesting for organizations is that this digital transformation, as much as it has been forced on them, is not that unusual, in the sense that oftentimes external shocks force organizations to change. A classic example was the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, for example. Externally, you had Enron and all that stuff happen, and the government came with a set of laws. What smart firms did was they took that law and they said, well, we are mandated to do this, and used that as an opportunity to fully change their IT, the manner in which they function, their processes, and all that stuff, right? And so that's exactly what is happening today, where Corona has, this COVID situation has forced us to change the way we work, and smart organizations are incorporating and figuring out which of these things actually is going to be useful for us in the long run. And they're thinking about this as they do it, rather than simply being responsive to a particular situation. And that leads us to the place of where this is primarily turning a lot about data. It's turning a lot about, because anything you do digitally, you keep track of. So if your employees are doing things digitally, your customers are doing things digitally, the whole world is doing stuff digitally, you keep track of, which is data, which leads to what do you do with that data and how do you make sense of it. And that's really one of the things that we focus on in the MSBA program as well, which is to think about those problems that arise as a result of this access to this kind of data, while keeping in mind ethics and all the other things that are important for the functioning of an organization. In fact, to that point, Renee, we, as you know, we have our annual conference coming up. Corona or not, we are running our annual conference. It just happens to be virtual now, right? On, I believe it's May 6th, if I'm right?
May 8th.
May 8th. So
You were
May
close.
8th, I'm sorry, yeah. May 8th is when our annual conference is coming up, and I'm sure, and the theme of the conference is around the digital transformation and the organization's response to these shocks created by Corona.
Excellent advice, and we will be posting our invitation to the Business Analytics Conference, and really look forward to hearing from some leaders in the space, some of whom are Emory alum. So as we move to the next segment here, we thought it would be useful to give students some advice. Not only has working shifted to remote, but also interviewing has shifted to remote. So Aditya, I'd like to start with you. What advice would you have for students who are maybe going to have their first virtual interview?
Sure, thanks, Renee. I'm going to list a few items. I'm sure everyone has a bunch of stuff here for these. One of them, obviously, is when you are going for an interview which is virtual. Make sure you dress for it. I know we said pants optional, but so obviously you're not going to stand up, but make sure you're wearing what you would wear on top, a jacket, a tie, whatever you would wear for the interview. You probably want to wear even for a virtual one. Make sure you set up, and this is some small, like very tactical things, but you see it a lot, is make sure you set up your technology before the call. Make sure you know it's working. Don't get up there and then try to figure it out and have the camera at a weird angle and make it not look as professional. Look at your environment. Now, I think few of us here have virtual backgrounds, which you may or may not be able to do for some interviews. If you're not, make sure the background is, look at your place, make sure it's a clean wall. I mean, like if you look at Steve's background, it's very clear. I mean, make sure it's not a cluttered room, like as if a bomb went off in your background. Make sure it's kind of set up properly so people aren't distracted by other things. And that's the key part, right? It's not the clutter. It's more about people being distracted by other things in their background, looking around like, what is that thing there? You don't want that happening. And finally, the last one I'd throw in there is make sure you don't have any distractions in the area. Technology, turn your phone off, put it in do not disturb mode, close all your other browser windows. Nothing's as important as that discussion you're having right there. The last thing you want is for someone to be like, talking to you and then you're looking away trying to do something else, or like clattering away and they know you're not responding to them, is something you don't want to do, and you don't want to become looking somewhere else or having discussions with other people or things like that. And I can keep going on, but I'm gonna hold off. I'm sure others have stuff to say as well.
Thank you, Aditya. Julie, I see you nodding your head there. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, I do. And by the way, absolutely echo everything Aditya said. Just a few more, because this is something that I've actually had a lot of experience with, interviewing people, well, mainly with Skype or Zoom or whatever. Another tip is many of you are probably at home, maybe back at your parents' house or a friend's, or saying that, make sure you let your roommate or your family members know that you've got this interview. I've actually been I've done interviews where all of a sudden in the middle of the interview, somebody walks by or somebody comes in and asks a question. The interview, as Aditya said, you don't want the interviewer to be distracted by anything. You want them to focus on what you're saying. So make sure make sure your home, people in your home or apartment know that you are going to be going into an interview. If at all possible, try and get rid of any extraneous noise. Again, that may not be possible depending on where you live, but if you can, try and make sure that you don't have that. Definitely check the lighting. That's really important, because sometimes if the light's coming in a certain way, the interviewer may not actually be able to see you and won't be able to see your expression and connect with you. You definitely want them to connect with you. Another thing is a couple other quick points. Make sure you've got your resume in front of you, the job interview in front of you, information about the company. Maybe print out the LinkedIn profile of the person that's interviewing you. Heaven forbid if you get in the interview and you can't, because you're doing a bunch or you've had a stressful day. We're all under, it's just such a different environment that you say the wrong name of the company, right? So you know who you're interviewing with, you know the company. And along those lines, make sure that the day before, so it's the most current information, that you get an update on how that company is doing. By chance, has there been a huge impact of the coronavirus, either positively or negatively? Maybe their sales are up, or maybe something has happened. You want to make sure that where it's appropriate, that you can bring in what's going on at that company, so that they know that you really are interested in working for them, and you know what's going on, and that therefore you can connect where it's appropriate maybe the work that you do with the work that they're involved in, or what are the problems that company is trying to deal with at the moment. Those are my tips.
Perfect advice, Julie. Thanks so much. Steve, would you like to add anything to this question before we move to our final thoughts?
Not much. I'd say that, that just reminds me of why Julie's so beloved at the school and why her alumni have such an affinity for her. But yeah, great work, Julie. I guess all I would say is transitioning then to what happens after the interview. I think, I'll echo a lot of what was said earlier. I think it's important, one, to be persistent, timely. I would say that Julie probably has best practices, but I would say, before you go to bed that same day, send a thank you email. And before the next day elapses, I would take the time to write a handwritten note to that person, try to figure out, which office they're in. And, a delighter is always when I get a handwritten note. It's an art that isn't done very much anymore. I understand that, students are encouraged to do this, but I can tell you, go out there and invest in your own letterhead and send a very short handwritten note just to express how much you appreciate them personally taking time to interview you. And again, reiterating anything that you heard that are going to be points of differentiation, as Ram said earlier, that are unique to you, where you think there's going to be a good fit. It's always a good time to continue to sell afterwards. And that handwritten note is definitely a differentiator. Not very many people. It's quite easy to send an email. It takes a little bit more effort to find the person's address, write the handwritten note. But all of that should be done very, very quickly. In the M&A world where I am, there's a saying that time kills deals. Well, the same goes for interviews. When someone extends the opportunity for you to interact with them, whether it's an alumni or a job interview, don't waste any time. Make sure that you are very thorough and very quick to respond and stay on top of things. And I think those little follow-ups and attentions to detail are very, very valuable. I would say the other thing that I probably failed to say earlier is, it's busy times for all of us, despite the fact we're all working at home. All of us on the call can attest to, we get far more emails than we could answer. So just because someone doesn't respond to one of your emails, don't suppose that they're not interested. That email may have gotten buried. Companies are going through crises right now in terms of laying off people and restructuring, as Julie said. So don't presume that your email is number one on their list to answer. So give it a few days, and then you can always send a little bump in terms of a new email, just to ensure that that goes back to the top of the person's inbox. Don't feel slighted if someone doesn't get back to you right away right now. But I think persistence, attention to detail, and making sure that your communication with that person is customized is the way to differentiate in this kind of market.
Thank you so much, Steve. That's very useful advice, and preparedness and thoughtfulness will certainly pay off for current students. Absolutely. So as we move to the final thoughts and just words that we would like to leave with today, let's start with you, Ram. Would you have anything to add to the discussion today?
Yes, I think it's amazing, all the points that all three of you made, Julie, Steve, and Aditya. And Steve, you've been an amazing mentor for this program as well. You even ran a project with us the very first year when you were, when you did your startup. And so the nature of the relationships that you can develop with alumni goes way beyond jobs. Jobs is just, it's just something that happens as a result of all these other things, right? So you do want to kind of keep that in mind. And mostly, if we were to summarize pretty much what all of you all said, you basically said, corona or no corona, be professional. Right. And I think that is really what you're all saying. And Julie said, make sure your room is, there are not people walking in your room, or, when Aditya says that don't have clutter behind you, you're just basically saying, be professional. Don't use this as an opportunity to kind of slack off. Right. It's really just, the more you put that face on, the more somebody is looking at a future colleague. Right. And your jobs are probably the ones that are least in trouble. So I think you should be very confident, and things will happen at the right time. Good luck, you all.
Thank you, Ram. Aditya?
Thanks, Renee. You know, one of the things I've been doing recently, and it's, you know, as Steve said earlier, everyone seems to have a little more time, right? Not a little more time on their hands. Make good use of that time. Obviously, right now, if you're still wrapping up your classes, focus on your classes, but use the time, whether it's you're a student or an alum, use the time to pick up a new skill. If you're sitting at home, so, you know, I'm going to give a little very quick story. I was trying to do something for my new business, and we were trying to pull information from the web. I didn't know how to go about it. I reached out to Ram first. I said, hey, I need to try and do this pretty advanced thing, which I have no idea how to do. And I, you know, got connected with an MSBA alum who actually worked with me a while ago on a little internship. And I just got on a call with him. He gave me the basics on how to use Python for whatever I needed to do. And I learned how to do that, and it worked. Ram, I haven't had a chance to tell you this yet, but it actually worked and I was able to do it. So I'm pretty proud of myself for doing that, because I have no idea what I was doing when I started. But use the time wisely. You have time. Pick up a new skill that, you know, you always said, oh, I wish I were able to do this. Do it. You have time now. Make good use of your time. And, you know, the last thing I would say is be positive. They look bleak right now. They will turn around sooner or later. Be positive when you're speaking to anyone. In your outlook, it's only going to serve you. Thanks, Renee.
Thanks, Aditya. Steve?
Two things. So I'll mirror what Aditya and Ram said. I think presuppose that before an interview, whether it's an alumni or an employer, they're going to Google you and look at your LinkedIn profile, right? So while you've got time on your hands, make sure that you are putting forward your best foot, so to speak, and think very thoughtfully around when someone Googles your name, are there any results that show up? And if not, think very deliberately around, now's the time to continue to differentiate. You know, one of the most impactful articles that I read while I was at Goizueta, I think was literally on my last day in one of my classes in my graduating year, and they had us read A Brand Called You, and think of yourself and managing your own brand as a CMO would think about managing the brand of a consumer packaged goods company. And I think that when you think that way and think about like, how do you want the external world to perceive you, you can start thinking about when people search for you and when they Google you and or get on LinkedIn, that it's something that you should be very deliberate about. And there are ways, I mean, you can look up SEO tricks online. There are ways to ensure that you build content out there, blog, etc., volunteer, set up your own landing pages if you want to and have Google index them, but make sure that whatever the message is that somebody sees about you when they search your name on Google or LinkedIn is the message that you want to be broadcasting. And that's consistent with what your internal messaging is.
Thank you, Steve. And Julie?
Well, this is everything that you've heard, and I just am so pleased that we've done this webinar. Everything that you've heard are best practices, right? So yes, they will serve you well now in what is an unprecedented situation and such a difficult time for all of us, but they will serve you in a lifetime for your career. And if you start them now and apply them and do these things that you've heard that Ram has shared and Aditya and Steve, it will help you, again, not only this job, but the next job and the next job. And you'll develop wonderful relationships with our alumni that too will last a lifetime. So I guess in addition to following this advice, the other thing I'd say is, yes, stay positive, and also know that you have the support and best wishes of everyone at Goizueta and at Emory. Everyone, the faculty, the staff, your classmates, you know, we all, the alumni, we want you to be successful. And within our power, we will try and help you be successful. And I hope that gives you encouragement. And I hope it gives you, gives you a sense that you're not alone in this, because you're not. We want you to be successful.
Thank you, Julie. I really echo all of the comments that all of you have made today. I couldn't agree more with everything that you all said. And I would just like to encourage not only the current students, but alumni to use this as an opportunity to get creative and, you know, reach out to maybe the people you've always wanted to connect with. And I have to say, this is a testament that worked for me. And, you know, I was able to spend just the last hour with some of the most interesting and influential people at Emory. And so thank you all so much for your time today. I know that it will benefit everyone and stay well, everyone. And we hope to see you all back on campus in the fall.
Thank you, Renee. And
Thanks for
you
having
all.
us, Renee.
Thanks, Renee.
Thank you.
Good luck, everyone.